I've been working here for 3 years, Emma said, her voice steady even as her hands shook. 3 years and you're firing me because I bought a man breakfast. Daniel crossed his arms. I'm firing you because you embarrassed this establishment. You sat a biker down in my dining room like he owned the place. He was sick, Daniel. He could barely stand up. That's not our problem. Emma looked at him for a long moment. It is now, she said quietly. It is now. If you've ever done the right thing and paid for it with everything you had, this story is for you. Before we begin, if you're new here, please subscribe to this channel and follow this story and all the way to the end. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. Emma Parker had learned early that the world didn't reward kindness. It tolerated kindness. It occasionally smiled at kindness. But reward it, no. That wasn't how the world she grew up in worked. She had grown up watching her mother work double shifts at a textile plant in the kind of town where everyone knew your name but nobody knew your business unless it was bad. Her mother had been kind too. Endlessly, stubbornly, almost recklessly kind. And what had it gotten her? A bad back, a landlord who raised the rent every 18 months, and a daughter who learned to count every dollar before it was spent. Emma remembered sitting at the kitchen table when she was 9 years old, watching her mother count coins from a mason jar into neat stacks on the tablecloth. Not dramatically, not with tears, just quietly, methodically, the way people count coins when they've done it so many times it no longer frightens them. She had promised herself she would be smarter. She had promised herself she would be careful. And for 25 years, she had kept that promise right up until the Tuesday morning in November, when a man with a gray beard and a black leather vest walked through the door of the Golden Oak Diner and changed the entire direction of her life. The diner sat on the corner of Maple and 4th in Willow Creek, a small town in the hill country of central Tennessee, where most people either worked at the feed supply company, the lumber yard, or drove 40 minutes into the city for something better. The Golden Oak had been there for 31 years. It had red vinyl booths along the windows, a counter with 8 stools, a pie case that was never quite as full as it looked from the road, and a coffee that was either exactly what you needed or the worst thing you'd ever tasted, depending entirely on who made it that morning. Emma had been working there since she was 22. 3 years of early mornings. 3 years of loading her car in the dark and driving through fog and rain and August heat that turned the highway into a shimmer. 3 years of splitting tips and memorizing orders and learning which regular customers wanted their coffee black before they even asked for it. She was good at her job, not in the showy, bubbly way that some waitresses are, good, the kind who flirt and joke and make the dining room feel like a party. Emma was good in a quieter way. She remembered things, she noticed things, she paid attention to the shift in someone's expression when their usual order wasn't what they actually needed that day. She had a talent for seeing people clearly, and people, even when they didn't realize it, responded to being seen. Her coworker Patty, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses perpetually pushed up on her head and a voice like a screen door in the wind, had told her once, "Emma, you're the kind of waitress people come back for. Not the food, not the prices, you." Emma had smiled at that. She'd also known it wasn't entirely true. People came back for habit and convenience, in the familiarity of a place that always smelled like bacon grease and fresh biscuits. But she'd appreciated Patty saying it. The reason Emma had stayed at the Golden Oak for 3 years, the reason she hadn't gone back to school or taken the administrative assistant job she'd been offered at the county offices, was her brother, Tyler. 21 years old, thin as a fence post, with their mother's dark eyes and a laugh that could shift the atmosphere of any room he walked into. 14 months earlier, Tyler had been working construction on a highway overpass 20 miles outside of town. He had been wearing his harness. He had followed every safety protocol he'd been trained to follow. None of it had mattered when the scaffolding section he was standing on gave way due to a subcontractor's failure to properly secure the anchor bolts. Tyler had fallen 18 feet onto a concrete form. He had survived. He was not paralyzed, which the doctors called remarkable, and Emma called the one piece of mercy in an otherwise merciless chain of events. But his left leg had been shattered in 3 places, his shoulder had required reconstructive surgery, and the nerve damage in his lower back had left him in chronic pain that varied from manageable to devastating, depending on the day. The lawsuit against the subcontractor was still grinding through the legal system. The workers' compensation covered some of it. Not enough, Never enough. Emma covered the rest. She covered Tyler's rent for the small apartment he shared with a friend because he couldn't work construction anymore, and the other jobs available to someone with a limited education and a body that betrayed him regularly paid barely enough to eat. She covered the co-pays on his prescriptions, the physical therapy appointments his insurance denied and re-denied, and occasionally approved the heating bill in the winter, because Tyler felt the cold differently now. The pain migrating and sharpening when the temperature dropped. She covered all of it, and she did not complain about covering it because Tyler was her brother and her parents were gone and there was no one else. She was 25 years old, and she was holding two people's lives together with the tips she made at the Golden Oak Diner, and she did it every single day without asking anyone to notice. This is who Emma Parker was on the morning the man walked in. It was 6:40 in the morning. The diner had been open for 40 minutes. The breakfast rush hadn't started yet. That wouldn't hit until 7:15, when the construction crews and the highway department workers and the shift change crowd from the county hospital came rolling in wanting eggs and toast and coffee in containers large enough to be taken seriously. Emma had just finished restocking the sweetener holders at the counter when she heard the bell above the door. She glanced up the way she always did, automatic and without expectation. The man who stepped through the door was the kind of man who commanded a second look simply by existing in a space. He was large, not in a threatening way exactly, but in the way of someone who had once been physically powerful and whose body still carried the structure of that even if the years had softened the edges. He had a gray beard, thick and close-cropped, and his hair was cut short beneath a black wool cap he pulled off as he came inside. He was wearing a heavy canvas jacket over a black leather vest. The kind of vest covered in patches, embroidered insignia and location tags and small symbols that Emma didn't know how to read, but recognized as belonging to a world she knew nothing about. He looked to be in his middle 60s, though it was the kind of face where certainty was difficult. It was a face that had seen weather, had seen difficulty, had made decisions, some of them probably wrong, and had lived with the weight of that in a way that left marks. What Emma noticed before she noticed any of that was the way he was standing. He was standing like a man who needed the door frame. His hand was flat against the wall just inside the entrance, and he wasn't resting it there casually. He was using it. His jaw was set in the way that people set their jaw when they are determined not to show something that is pressing hard on them from the inside. Emma put down the sweetener caddy and walked toward him. "Good morning," she said. "You want to sit down?" He looked at her. His eyes were dark gray, sharp and assessing. He had the look of a man who decided quickly whether he trusted someone, and the mechanism behind that look was not particularly comfortable to be on the receiving end of. "I'm fine," he said. His voice was deep and measured, a voice accustomed to being listened to. "You don't look fine," Emma said, not unkindly, just as an observation. "You look like you'd rather be sitting." Something moved through his expression. Not quite surprise, more like a recalibration. "There a problem with me being here?" he asked. "Why would there be?" He glanced down at himself, at the vest, at the patches, back at her. "I've had that problem before," he said. Emma looked at him directly. "You want coffee or water first?" There was a pause, a brief one, then something in his shoulder, something she hadn't even fully registered as tension until it released, settled slightly. "Water," he said, "and coffee, thank you." She walked him to the booth, second from the back, the one that faced the door, which she'd learned over the years was often preferred by men who'd spent any time being cautious, and brought him water and coffee and a menu. She sat on the table without comment. She did not hover. She gave him 10 minutes. When she came back, he was sitting with both hands wrapped around the coffee mug and his eyes fixed on the middle distance in that particular way of someone who is in pain and managing it by refusing to acknowledge it directly. "You need a few more minutes," she asked. "I need something that won't make me feel worse," he said. Then unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one. "That's probably not on the menu." "Depends on what's making you feel bad," Emma said. "You eaten this morning?" "No." "When's the last time you ate?" He thought of salt on it at the "Yesterday sometime early." Emma didn't say anything to that. She wrote on her pad, "I'm going to bring you eggs and toast. Scrambled. It's easy on the stomach. You tell me if there's anything you can't eat." "You don't need to." It's breakfast time, she said simply. That's what we do here. She put in the order herself and paid for it from the $23 and some change she had in her apron pocket, which was itself a significant portion of what she'd pulled in the previous afternoon. She didn't think dramatically about it. She wasn't performing generosity. She just looked at a man who hadn't eaten since yesterday and ordered him breakfast. She brought it out herself and set it in front of him. He looked at the plate, then he looked at her. I didn't order this. I know. How much is it? Nothing, she said. On me. He set his jaw again. That particular stubbornness of a man who did not like to receive things, who had built his entire life on the structure of exchange and self-sufficiency, and the clean, honest transaction of owing nothing to nobody. I pay for what I eat. Okay, Emma said. Then pay me back sometime. Right now, just eat before it gets cold. She walked away before he could argue. Patty caught her by the coffee station, eyes wide, voice low. Emma, that's a Hell's Angel. I know. Like an actual... Patty, he hasn't eaten since yesterday. Lower your voice. Patty looked at her for a moment. Then she looked across the diner at the man in the booth who was eating his eggs, with the careful, measured movements of someone trying not to reveal how hungry he actually was. Okay, Patty said quietly. Okay. He stayed for 40 minutes. He didn't talk much. Emma refilled his coffee twice. She didn't ask questions. She didn't try to connect or charm or demonstrate what a good person she was. She just served him the way she served everyone attentively and without fuss, and let him be what he was, which was a tired man on a cold morning who needed a place to sit down. When he stood to leave, he left cash on the table. Not just for the meal, considerably more. He put his cap back on and buttoned the canvas jacket and walked toward the door, then stopped and turned. Emma, he said. She was clearing another table. She looked up. Jack Walker, he said. He extended his hand. She crossed the room and shook it. His grip was firm and deliberate. Thank you, he said. You're welcome, Mr. Walker. Jack? You're welcome, Jack. He held her gaze for one moment longer than was strictly conversational. There was something in it. Not romantic, not transactional. Something more like recognition. Like a man who'd learned over many decades to look carefully at people and had just finished looking carefully at her. Then he walked out. The bell rang above the door. Emma went back to clearing tables. She did not see Daniel Whitmore until 20 minutes later, when he came out of his office, which was less an office than a repurposed storage room near the back hallway, with a desk shoved in the corner, and a window that didn't open properly. Daniel was 38 years old and had been manager of the Golden Oak for 4 years, a fact he referenced frequently enough that it had stopped impressing anyone. He was a precise man in the way that some precise men are not precise because precision served them or others, but precise as a form of control, a way of arranging a small world into the shape of authority. He had a habit of standing in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed and his eyes moving around the diner, cataloging, assessing, finding things that could be improved. He came to stand in front of Emma while she was wiping down the booth where Jack Walker had sat. Who was that? He asked. Emma glanced up. A customer. That's not what I'm asking, and you know it. Daniel looked at the table, at the seat across from it, at the window. Was that a biker with a patch? He came in for breakfast, Emma said. Emma. Daniel's voice shifted into the register he used when he wanted to establish that he was having a different kind of conversation than the one it appeared to be. People like that don't come in here. Emma kept wiping the table. He did this morning. Did you seat him? He needed to sit down. That is not... Daniel stopped. Started again. This establishment has a reputation. We have regulars, families. Do you understand what it looks like when we seat someone like that in here without knowing anything about who he is or what he might be involved in? Emma straightened up. She turned and looked at Daniel with the particular expression of a woman who has been doing hard work for a long time and has very little patience left for the kind of argument that isn't really an argument but is actually about something else entirely. He was a man who hadn't eaten since yesterday, she said. He was having a hard time standing up. I brought him breakfast. Did you pay for it? A beat. Yes. Daniel's expression shifted, not to anger exactly, to something more careful and therefore more dangerous. You used your own money to buy breakfast for a stranger you didn't know, based entirely on what his appearance... based on the fact that he was hungry. Emma, that is not, he pressed his lips together. I need you to understand something. I'm responsible for this place, for how it looks, for the customers we attract, for what people feel when they walk in here. If I let someone like that become a regular feature, one breakfast Daniel, don't do that. Don't make it small. You know what those clubs are. You know what the patches mean. He was polite. He sat in a corner and ate eggs and left a good tip and thanked me when he left. Daniel studied her. His voice went very level. Did you or did you not spend your own money buying breakfast for a stranger without my approval? Emma looked at him. She thought about the $23 in her apron. She thought about Tyler's heating bill. She thought about the way Jack Walker had gripped the door frame when he first came in, trying not to show how much he needed to sit down. Yes, she said, I did. Then I need you to think carefully about what comes next, Daniel said. I already did, Emma told him, before I ordered the food. Daniel exhaled, set his jaw, looked at the window, looked back. Emma, I've kept you on here for 3 years. I've worked around your schedule when Tyler needed things. I've been flexible. I've been accommodating. And this is how you respond when I try to explain to you why something was inappropriate. You didn't explain anything, Emma said. You told me I should have let a sick man sit by the door without food because of how he was dressed. I told you it reflects poorly on who, Daniel, on you. The silence that fell between them was not the comfortable silence of two people thinking. It was the silence of a line being crossed and both of them standing on opposite sides of it and neither of them moving back. Daniel straightened, crossed his arms. He had made a decision. She could see him making it. She could see the moment it had finished forming. I'm going to need you to clock out, he said. Emma went very still. I'm relieving you of your shift today, and then I'm going to need you to take some time and think about whether your values are a good fit for the responsibilities of this position. You're firing me, Emma said. I'm suggesting. Don't, she said quietly. Don't suggest. Say what you're doing. Daniel held her gaze. You're terminated, Emma. I'm sorry. He didn't sound sorry. Emma looked at him for a long moment. She thought about saying something. There was a great deal she could have said. About 3 years of covered shifts and difficult customers and 16-hour days over the holidays. About what it had taken to drive through ice storms to open the diner on time. About Tyler, though she could never bring Tyler into this because Tyler was hers and not something to be bargained with. She didn't say any of it. She untied her apron. She laid it on the table she had just cleaned. Okay, she said. She got her bag from the back. She said goodbye to Patty, who stood in the kitchen doorway, with her reading glasses pushed up on her head, and her expression somewhere between disbelief and fury, and who gripped Emma's arm hard and said, this isn't right. And Emma said, I know, and then walked out through the back. She sat in her car in the parking lot for 3 minutes. She did not cry. She stared through the windshield at the concrete block wall of the diner's rear exterior, and she thought with the particular clarity that sometimes comes in the minute, directly after a disaster, about what the heating bill would be, about Tyler's therapy appointment on Thursday, about the insurance payment due on the 15th, about the checking account balances she had memorized the way you memorize things that frighten you. Then she started the car. Then she drove home. She told herself she would figure it out. She told herself she had figured out harder things. She didn't entirely believe it, but she said it to herself anyway because sometimes that's the only tool you have. She had been home for 2 hours when her phone rang. Unknown number, area code she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail. Hello? Is this Emma Parker? The voice was female, warm but businesslike. Middle-aged, Emma guessed. Maybe older. Yes. My name is Carol. I'm calling because I heard what happened this morning at the Golden Oak. I wanted to reach out. Emma frowned. How did you hear about that? Jack told us. The name landed quietly. Emma sat up a little straighter. Jack Walker, she said. Yes. A pause. Emma, I want you to know that what you did this morning, it mattered. More than you know. Jack hasn't... The woman stopped herself, started again more carefully. He doesn't let people do things for him easily. He hasn't in a very long time. What you did the way you did it, without any kind of calculation behind it, that isn't something he takes lightly. Emma didn't know what to say to that. I was just doing my job, she said. No, Carol said gently. You weren't. You were doing more than your job, and you lost your job because of it. That's not nothing, Emma. I'm fine, Emma said, automatic, the reflex of someone accustomed to reassuring in people. I know you are, Carol said. That's not why I'm calling. I'm calling because we want you to know that we know and that there are people paying attention. Emma didn't ask who he was. She thought she understood vaguely the shape of it, even if she didn't understand the specifics. Okay, she said. Get some rest, Carol said, and keep your phone close. The call ended. Emma set her phone on the table and looked at the wall. Outside, the wind had come up. She could hear it pressing against the windows, the cold fingers of late November, testing the seals, looking for the places where the house gave. She thought about Jack Walker and the way he had gripped the doorframe. She thought about what it cost a man like that to walk into a place where he knew he might not be welcome. She thought about how he had thanked her before he left. Not with performance, not with excessive gratitude, just simply directly the way a person says thank you when they mean it. Her phone rang again. Different number, different area code. She answered. And then again 20 minutes after that. And then again before she went to bed. Different voices, different cities, all of them calm, all of them with the same quiet message delivered in different words from different people across what was beginning to feel like a very large country. You are not alone. Emma Parker had spent 3 years holding two people's lives together with the tips from a diner job in a small Tennessee town. She had never expected anyone to notice. She had never asked anyone to. But somewhere between 6:40 in the morning and 11 o'clock that night, something had shifted. Something was moving, and she did not yet understand what it was or where it was going or what it would cost. And she lay in the dark with her phone on the nightstand and the November wind pressing against the glass, and she tried to sleep. She mostly failed, but she kept her phone close, just as Carol had told her to. By the following morning, she had received 11 calls. By noon, it was 19. By evening, she had stopped counting. The last call that day came at 9:15 at night, and the voice on the other end was a man named Raymond, who told her without preamble that he was calling from outside Spokane and that he'd ridden with Jack Walker for 17 years, and that what Emma had done was the kind of thing that some people remembered. Not many people left like you, Raymond said. I mean that straight, not as a compliment exactly, more as an observation. I just bought a man breakfast, Emma said. She'd said some version of this to every caller. You bought a man breakfast when you could barely afford to, Raymond said, when your manager was watching. When the easy thing, the safe thing, the thing that wouldn't have cost you anything was to just walk him back to the door and say, sorry, we're at capacity. You didn't do the easy thing. Emma didn't answer that. I'm just letting you know, Raymond said, that there are people who think that matters. He hung up. Emma set the phone on her knee and sat for a while in the quiet of her apartment. She thought about the $23. She thought about Tyler, who had called that afternoon and listened to the whole story, and then was quiet for a long time, and then said with a conviction that she heard underneath the pain in his voice, you did exactly right, Emma. Whatever happens, you did exactly right. She thought about Daniel Whitmore and his crossed arms and his careful voice telling her that her values weren't a good fit. She thought about Jack Walker walking out through the door of the Colden Oak with his wool cap pulled on and his hand extended for her to shake. She didn't know what was coming. She had no map for this. But she thought about what Raymond had said. There are people who think that matters. And she sat with that for a while. And she decided to keep her phone close. The calls didn't stop. Emma had expected them to taper off by the second morning. That was how things went in her experience. People got stirred up, they reacted, and then the ordinary weight of their own lives pulled them back, and whatever had briefly mattered stopped mattering as much. She had seen it happen with Tyler's accident. There had been a surge of concern from people in town, casseroles and phone calls and promises, and then gradually, predictably, life reasserted itself and people went back to their own problems because their own problems were real and pressing and Tyler's problems were someone else's. But these calls were different. They didn't taper. If anything, the volume increased through the second day, spreading outward in some pattern. She couldn't track or predict, moving through networks she didn't understand, carried by people she'd never met and would probably never meet, all of whom seemed to know the same basic facts. A waitress in Willow Creek, Tennessee had bought a man breakfast, had lost her job for it, and that man's name was Jack Walker. On the second morning, Emma was sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a notepad she'd been using to track the calls. Not because she had a plan for doing anything with the information, but because writing things down gave her the sensation of being organized even when she was not. When her phone rang with a number she recognized, it was Jack. She answered on the second ring. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she said back. There was a brief silence. Not awkward. Jack Walker was a man comfortable with silence in a way that most people weren't, and Emma had spent enough years reading the emotional temperature of a room to understand the difference between a silence that needed filling and a silence that was itself a form of communication. "You doing all right?" he asked. "I'm managing," Emma said. "The phone has been busy." "I know." Another pause. "I want to explain something to you, not to make you feel any particular way about it, just because you deserve to understand what's happening." Emma set her pen down. "Okay. When I left your diner yesterday," Jack said, "I made some calls. I want you to know why." "I'm listening." "I've been writing for 40 years, he said. 40 years with the Angels. In that time, I've been in every kind of situation you can imagine, and a lot you probably can't. I've walked into places and watched people decide who I was before I opened my mouth. Gas stations, restaurants, hospitals, churches once, which I thought was its own kind of irony." He stopped for a moment. "You learn to expect a certain thing. You learn what the look means when someone sees the vest. And after long enough, you stop being surprised by it. You just adjust. You give people the benefit of what they've already decided and you move on." Emma didn't say anything. She was listening with the particular quality of attention she gave to things that mattered. "Yesterday morning I walked into your place in bad shape," Jack continued. "My back's been giving me problems. I wasn't going to show it. I never show it, that's just how I'm built. But I was in genuine pain and I needed to sit down, and I walked through that door knowing, not guessing, knowing that there was a real chance I'd be asked to leave before I got to a seat." "I wouldn't have done that," Emma said. "I know that now," he said. "I didn't know it when I came in. When you walked over to me." He stopped again. She heard him exhale slowly, the measured breath of a man choosing words with care. "The way you talked to me, not like you were being brave about something, not like you were making a point, just like I was a person who looked like he needed to sit down. That's it. That's all it was." "That's all it was," Emma said. "I know." And his voice carried something she hadn't heard in it at the diner, something quieter and older and less guarded. "I called some people because I wanted them to know that's still out there. That kind of thing. I wasn't trying to start anything. I wasn't trying to get your manager in trouble. I wanted the people in my life to know that I met someone who still does it that way. Simple and real and without any kind of agenda behind it." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Jack," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Are you all right? You're back. I mean, did you see a doctor?" There was a pause, then unmistakably a short, low sound that she identified after a moment as a laugh. Not a big laugh, just a surprised exhale of a man who hadn't expected to be asked that. "I'm seeing someone today," he said. "Yes." "Good," Emma said simply. "Emma," he said, "keep your phone close today. People keep saying that to me. People keep saying it because it's true." Another pause. "There's something coming. I want you to be ready for it." What kind of something? But he had already ended the call. She found out what kind of something at 11:30 that morning when Patty called her, and Patty's voice was doing a thing it had never done in the 3 years Emma had known her, which was shaking. "Emma," Patty said, "I need you to listen to me." "Patty, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. That's not what I mean." Emma heard her take a breath. "Daniel came in this morning. He's been on the phone all morning. I don't know who's calling, but it's Emma, his face. He looks like a man who sat down in something." Emma set her coffee down. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he came in perfectly normal this morning, and then his office phone started ringing, and now he's in there and he won't come out. And every time I walk past the door, I can hear him talking in this very careful voice. The kind of voice men use when they know they made a mistake and they're trying to figure out how far the damage goes." Emma said nothing. "He fired you yesterday," Patty continued, and now the shaking in her voice had an edge to it, something harder beneath the tremor. "He fired you because you bought a sick man his breakfast, and I stood in that kitchen and let it happen, and I didn't say a word because I have my own bills and my own situation, And I told myself it wasn't my fight, and I've been sick about it since the moment you walked out that door. Patty, let me finish. Patty's voice steadied. Someone called the main line this morning. A man, polite, very calm. He asked to speak to the owner or the manager, and Cheryl put him through to Daniel. And I don't know exactly what was said, but Daniel came out of that office 20 minutes later, looking like something had reorganized the inside of his chest. And then the calls kept coming. She paused. Emma, who did you say that biker was? Emma Van. Emma thought about it. His name is Jack Walker. Silence on Patty's end. Patty, Emma said. Jack Walker, Patty repeated slowly, like she was touching each word to make sure it was real. Like Iron Jack Walker. He didn't mention the iron part. Emma. Patty's voice dropped to a register Emma had never heard from her, something that lived somewhere between reverence and alarm. Emma, I need you to understand something. My ex-husband rode for 12 years, not Angels, a different club, but everyone knows that name. Jack Walker isn't just a member. He's been national president. He stepped back from the role some years ago, but the respect doesn't go away. It never goes away with a man like that. When Jack Walker tells people that something happened, people listen. Emma absorbed this. He told me he just made some calls, she said. He made some calls, Patty said, and the way she said it communicated clearly that making some calls was not a description that fully captured the situation. Emma, there are people I don't know how many there are people talking about what happened here, what Daniel did. It's spreading. I can feel it spreading even from in here. Emma sat with that for a moment. What do you want me to do, Patty? Nothing, Patty said immediately. That's not why I called. I called because I should have said something yesterday. I should have told Daniel that what he was doing was wrong, and I didn't, and I want you to know that I know that. You have your bills, Emma said quietly. You have your situation. So did you, Patty said. And you still bought that man his eggs. Emma didn't have an answer to that. He's going to call you, Patty said. Daniel, he's going to call you today. I'd bet my week's tips on it. She was right by 45 minutes. Daniel called at 12:17. Emma stared at her phone for 2 full rings before she answered because there was something she needed to settle in herself first. Some alignment of her spine and her breath and the particular quality of her composure that she would need for whatever this conversation was going to be. She answered. Emma, Daniel's voice had changed. It was still precise. It was still controlled. But underneath the control, there was something new, something structural that had shifted the way a building sounds different after the foundation was moved. Thank you for taking my call. Sure, Emma said. He stopped, started again. I want to talk about what happened yesterday. Okay. I've been receiving some calls this morning about the situation, about the decision I made. Another pause. I want you to know that I've been thinking about it. Emma waited. I may have acted. He was choosing each word so carefully it was almost painful to listen to. I may have acted without having the full context of the situation. What context were you missing? Emma asked. Her voice was even, not aggressive, not soft, just a question delivered straight. I wasn't aware of Mr. Walker's circumstances, his condition when he came in. I wasn't aware that he had Daniel, Emma said. He was a man who hadn't eaten since the day before. He could barely stand up. That was the entire situation. There wasn't more context. Silence. I responded to his appearance, Daniel said, and there it was, the smallest acknowledgement, the minimum possible, the thing she hadn't expected him to actually say. Yes, Emma said, you did. I understand that there are people who are concerned about how the situation was handled. I don't know what other people are doing, Emma said. This was mostly true. She knew calls were being made. She didn't know what was in them. I just know what happened. Emma. Daniel's voice tightened slightly, then released. I'd like to talk about the possibility of you coming back. Emma closed her eyes. She had known this was coming. She had known it from the moment Patty called and described the look on Daniel's face. She had known it the same way you know a storm is coming, before the sky changes. Something shifts in the air, in the pressure, in the quality of the light, and you just know. She opened her eyes. Why, she said. I'm sorry. Why do you want me to come back? A pause. Because you're a good employee and... Daniel, she kept her voice level. 24 hours ago, you told me my values weren't a good fit for the responsibilities of the position. Are you telling me my values changed, or are you telling me something else changed? The silence that followed was the longest one yet. Something else changed, Daniel said. And there was something almost human in that admission, some small crack in the architecture of his self-presentation through which a more honest version of the man briefly appeared. Emma respected honesty even when it came wrapped in self-interest. I appreciate you saying that, she said. I need to think about it. Of course, Daniel said. Take whatever time you need. She ended the call and sat for a moment in the quiet of her apartment. Then she called Tyler. He answered on the first ring, which told her he had been waiting. He called, Tyler said. Not a question. Just now. And Huishen, he wants me back. Tyler was quiet for a moment. She heard him shifting on the couch, the specific sound of it, and knew he was repositioning because his back had been bad today. She could always tell. What do you want? Tyler asked. Emma thought about it, really thought about it. I want to understand what's actually happening, she said. Not with Daniel, with all of it, with the calls, with I want to understand what Jack Walker started and why and where it's going. Then you should ask him, Tyler said. He's not easy to reach. But he called you this morning, Tyler said, and he told you to keep your phone close. That's not a man who's done talking to you. She thought about that for the rest of the afternoon. Duh. The call she'd been waiting for came at 4:47. It wasn't Jack. It was a woman named Sandra who introduced herself as someone who handled communications for the national chapter and whose voice carried the efficient warmth of a person who was simultaneously managing several large things and had decided to treat Emma as though Emma was the only large thing currently in front of her. I want to give you a clearer picture of what's been happening, Sandra said, because you deserve to know and because things are moving faster than Jack expected when he made the initial calls. Faster how? Emma said. The story has been moving through the chapters for the past day and a half, Sandra said. Not officially, not through any organized channel, just the way things move when something genuine happens, person to person, chapter to chapter. Somebody hears something and they tell somebody else, and that person tells 3 more people, and it grows. What Jack shared wasn't a complaint. He wasn't asking for anything specific. He was just telling people that he'd met someone, that he'd been treated like a human being at a diner in Willow Creek, and that the woman who treated him that way had been fired for it. He told them all of that, Emma said. He told them all of that, Sandra confirmed. And Emma, I want you to understand something about how this community works. We take care of our own, yes. Every group does that. But there's something else, a particular sensitivity to the issue of being judged by appearance. Every person who wears a patch has a story about walking into a place and watching the room react before they said a word. It's not paranoia, it's accumulated experience. And when Jack's story went around, when people heard about a young woman who looked past the vest and saw a man who needed help and then was punished for it, Sandra paused. It meant something. It meant something to a lot of people. Emma was very still. How many people? She asked. Are you asking me for a number? I'm asking you so I understand what we're talking about. Sandra was quiet for just a moment. As of this morning, there are chapter representatives in 7 states who have been in contact about your situation. Most of them are asking the same question. What question? What can we do? Emma set her hand flat on the table. She needed something solid under it. Sandra, she said, I need you to be straight with me. I don't want anyone to do anything on my behalf that I haven't agreed to. I don't want trouble. I don't want I don't want anyone to be threatened or stop, Sandra said gently but firmly. Nobody is threatening anyone. Emma, we're bikers. We're not a crime movie. The men and women in this organization have families. They have businesses. They have children in schools and parents in nursing homes. What they want to do for you isn't frightening. It's actually very simple. What is it? Emma said. They want to show up, Sandra said. Emma didn't understand immediately. Then she did. Show up where? She said slowly. At the Golden Oak Diner, Sandra said. Not to confront anyone. Not to make threats. Just to eat breakfast. To be customers. And to fill a room and demonstrate that kindness, your specific concrete act of kindness, is the kind of thing that doesn't disappear unnoticed. She paused. And to show that man's business that what he threw away was valuable, that what you are is valuable. Because sometimes the only language that people in certain positions actually hear is the language of consequence. Emma stared at the wall. How many people are we talking about? She said. Sandra said the number. Emma sat back in her chair. 200, she said. Approximately, Sandra said. Some may not make it. Some may exceed that. It depends on weather and distance and scheduling. But the commitment as of this afternoon is roughly 200 riders from multiple states. Emma tried to form a response and found she couldn't locate one. Emma, Sandra said, this isn't something being done to you or for you without your input. I'm calling you because Jack insisted that you be part of this decision. He said, and I'm quoting him directly, that the last thing he wanted to do was turn your act of kindness into something you were uncomfortable with. Emma pressed her fingers to her eyes. When, she said. Tomorrow morning, Sandra said. Sunrise. The word landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Tomorrow, Emma repeated. We can change the timing if you need more time to... No, Emma said. Something in her voice had shifted, become more certain. She recognized the feeling. It was the same feeling she'd had when she walked Jack Walker to the second booth from the back and put a menu on the table and decided without drama or deliberation that she was going to feed a man who needed to eat. No, tomorrow is fine. Are you sure? I'm sure. There was a warmth in Sandra's voice when she spoke next. Jack was right about you. What did he say? He said you were the kind of person who does things simply because they're the right things to do, and that kind of person usually isn't shaken very easily. Emma thought about the morning before sitting in the parking lot behind the diner, staring at the concrete wall running through Tyler's bills in her head. I was shaken, she said honestly. I'm still a little shaken. Good, Sandra said. Being shaken and still deciding to go forward, that's the thing. That's always the thing. Emma called Tyler back. She told him everything Sandra had said. She told him about the 200 riders, about tomorrow morning, about Jack Walker insisting she be part of the decision. Tyler was quiet for the entire telling of it. When she finished, he said, Emma, do you know what I keep thinking about? What? That morning in the hospital, he said, after the fall, when I woke up and you were in the chair next to me and you'd been there all night because I found out later you'd gotten there before the ambulance did somehow. I don't even know how you got there that fast and you were just sitting there. And when you saw I was awake, you didn't cry, you didn't fall apart, you just leaned forward and you said, you're okay, I'm right here. Just that, simple and real and straight. Emma was quiet. That's who you are, Tyler said. That's what you did for that man, just in a different room. He paused. And now 200 people want to show up for you the same way you showed up for him. She didn't say anything for a long moment. You're okay, Tyler said softly. We're right here. Emma closed her eyes. She thought about this $23, about Jack Walker's hand on the doorframe, about Daniel's voice on the phone carefully rearranging himself after the fact, about Sandra saying 200, about the November wind pressing against her windows, about simple things that somehow turned into enormous ones. She said goodnight to Tyler. She set her phone on the nightstand. She lay in the dark. And for the first time since Tuesday morning, she slept. She was up before 5. She didn't decide to be. She just woke clean and sudden and fully present, the way you sometimes wake when something important is happening and your body knows it before the rest of you catches up. She made coffee. She showered. She put on the same jeans and the green sweater she'd worn on the first cold day of November because she needed something that felt like herself. She thought about calling Jack. She decided against it. Some things didn't need more words. At 6:10, she got in her car. She drove toward the Golden Oak Diner. She wasn't going back. Not yet. Not like that. She was just going to see what happened when 200 people decided that one act of simple human kindness was worth showing up for. She parked on the road 3 blocks from the diner and turned off her engine. The morning was very cold. The sky was the specific blue-gray of early November dawn, the light still deciding itself the world between dark and day. And then she heard it, distant at first, then not distant, the sound of engines, not one engine, not 10 engines, hundreds of engines, coming from every direction, coming together, coming here. Emma Parker sat in her car in the early morning dark and listened to what 200 people sounded like when they moved with a single purpose. And she put her hands over her mouth, and she didn't cry. But it was close. It was very close. The sound reached her before anything else did. Emma was still in her car, 3 blocks from the Golden Oak, hands wrapped around the steering wheel. She had stopped consciously gripping at some point in the last few minutes. The engine was off. The heater had gone cold. She hadn't moved since she parked because something in her body had decided without consulting her that moving would break whatever was happening. The sound built the way a storm builds, first as a vibration in the air. More felt than heard, something below the threshold of clear sound that you register in your chest before your ears catch it. Then it resolved into individual threads, engine notes, distinguishable one from another. And then it became something unified again, not one engine and not many engines, but something in between. Something that had its own quality and weight, the sound of a collective decision made physical. She watched in her rearview mirror first, then she turned. From the south end of Maple Street they came, from the intersection at 4th, from the highway on-ramp 2 blocks east, from directions she hadn't anticipated and couldn't see from where she sat. They moved in formation, not a rigid military formation, but the natural grouping of people who had ridden together long enough that proximity was instinctive, who knew without discussing it how close to hold and when to give space. Black leather, chrome, helmets catching the first gray light, patches she couldn't read from this distance and probably wouldn't have known how to read up close. Men in their 50s, their 60s, their 70s. Women riding their own machines or riding behind partners, straight-backed and unhurried. A man with a white beard so long it was tucked into his jacket. A woman with silver hair cut close to her head, who rode with the particular ease of someone who had been doing this since before Emma was born. They filled Maple Street from curb to curb. They kept coming. Emma's phone vibrated in her lap. "Jack," she answered. "Where are you?" And he said. "3 blocks back," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Can you see the diner?" "Not yet." "Drive closer," he said, "but park on the east side. Don't come in yet." "Jack," she stopped, started again. "How did you do this?" There was a pause that felt like him deciding how much of an answer to give. "I didn't do this," he said. "I just told the truth about what happened. People did the rest themselves." She drove. She got close enough to see the front of the Golden Oak Diner, and she pulled over and stopped again. And what she saw made her put her hand flat against the window glass, as if she could feel it through the barrier. The parking lot was full, not of regular customers. Every space was taken by motorcycles, and they spilled into the lot across the street, and some had pulled half onto the sidewalk, and riders were still coming in from the highway and parking in whatever space remained and dismounting with an orderliness that seemed almost choreographed, except that nobody was choreographing it. It was just what happened when a large group of people shared the same clear intention. They were going inside, not in a rush, not in a crowd. In small groups of 2, 3, 4 moving through the diner's doors in a steady stream, and she could see through the large front window, the one that faced Maple Street, and that she had wiped down 1,000 times from the inside, that the booths were filling. The counter stools were filling. People were standing along the walls, not because they were threatening anyone, but simply because there was no more room to sit, and they were ordering. She could see Cheryl at the counter moving fast, writing on her pad. She could see the kitchen window lit up and Kevin the cook visible through it, moving with the urgent focused energy of someone who had just realized this was going to be the busiest morning of their professional life. They were just eating breakfast. 200 people eating breakfast. Because one woman spent $23. Ubod. She didn't know how long she sat there before the knock on her window. She startled. Hard. Her hand came off the glass and she spun, and there was Jack Walker standing on the sidewalk next to her car. His canvas jacket buttoned his wool cap on his breath, making small clouds in the cold air. She opened the door and got out. They stood on the sidewalk, looking at each other. Up close in the early morning light, he looked better than he had 2 days ago. Not well exactly, but the particular desperate quality of the exhaustion she'd seen when he first walked into the diner was gone, replaced by something that sat more easily on him, something that might have been called peace if Jack Walker was the kind of man who admitted to things like peace. "You sleep?" he asked. "Some," Emma said. "You, some," he agreed. They stood for a moment in the sound of engines and voices and the distant clatter of plates. "Jack," Emma said, "I need to ask you something and I need you to answer me straight." "I'll try," he said, which was she was beginning to understand how Jack Walker said yes. Why did you come into my diner that morning, specifically that diner? He looked at her for a moment. I broke down on the highway 8 miles south, he said. My bike. Something I should have had serviced a month ago and kept putting off. I called someone to come get the bike, and I walked to the nearest open place, and your diner was it. So it was chance, Emma said. You weren't coming to Willow Creek specifically. No, he said, and you didn't know me. Never been to that diner in my life. Emma absorbed this. So everything that happened, it started with a broken down bike. And a woman who didn't judge what she saw when she looked at it, Jack said. Then before she could respond, he nodded toward the diner. Come on. I should wait out here. Emma, he said it simply with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being listened to. Not forceful, not demanding, just sure. You should be in there. She went. Why? Walking through the door of the Golden Oak Diner on a Thursday morning in November, surrounded by 200 people who had come from 7 states to be there, was one of the most disorienting experiences of Emma Parker's life. Not because it was frightening, not because it was overwhelming in any way she had anticipated, because it was ordinary. That was the thing that hit her first and kept hitting her. The diner smelled like it always smelled: coffee and bacon grease, and the particular warmth of a kitchen working hard. The light was the same, the red vinyl booths were the same, the counter stools, the pie case, the window she'd wiped down 1,000 times. All of it exactly the same. What was different was the people in it. They were talking to each other, yes, but also, and this was the thing she hadn't expected to the regular staff. Cheryl was at the far end of the counter, telling a woman with gray braids and a leather vest something that was apparently funny, because the woman was laughing, and Cheryl was laughing, and it looked for all the world like 2 people who had known each other for years rather than 20 minutes. Kevin had come out from the kitchen, which he almost never did, and was standing near the pass-through talking to a man who appeared to be explaining something with great enthusiasm about the mechanics of a particular type of engine, and Kevin was nodding in a way that suggested he was actually following the explanation. Nobody was performing, nobody was making a point. They were just in a diner eating breakfast, because that's what people do in the morning. Emma stood just inside the doorway and didn't know where to put herself. Then Patty found her. Patty came out of nowhere from the direction of the coffee station, and she put both arms around Emma and held on with the specific grip of someone who has been waiting to do exactly this for the past 36 hours and is not going to waste another second now that the opportunity has arrived. I'm sorry, Patty said in Emma's hair. You don't have to. I'm sorry, Patty said again, firmer. I should have said something. I know I should have. Emma held her back. You're here now, she said. Patty pulled back and looked at Emma's face with the frank, assessing gaze of a woman who had raised 3 children and could tell the difference between fine and fine. You okay, honestly? Emma said. Always. I don't know yet, Emma said. Ask me in an hour. Patty nodded. That was an honest answer, and Patty respected honest answers. Daniel's here, she said then. Her voice changed on his name, going flat in a way that communicated everything. He came in about 40 minutes ago. He's in the back. Emma went still. In his office. Standing at the kitchen door, Patty said. Just watching. He hasn't said a word to anyone. He's been standing there watching the room for 40 minutes. Emma looked toward the kitchen. I'll deal with it, Emma said. Emma, it's okay. And the remarkable thing was that she meant it. It's actually okay. She found Daniel exactly where Patty said he'd be. He was standing in the half-open doorway between the kitchen and the dining room, and the position was distinctly uncomfortable looking, like a man who couldn't decide whether to go forward or backward and had consequently stopped moving altogether. He was watching the room. She was sure he'd been watching it for every one of those 40 minutes, watching 200 people fill his dining room and order food and pay for it and laugh and talk and occupy his space with a kind of peaceful, purposeful authority that couldn't be argued with or managed or reorganized by any of his usual mechanisms of control. He didn't see Emma approach. She stopped a few feet from him. Daniel, she said. He turned, and whatever she'd expected to see on his face, more of the careful management from yesterday's phone call, or something defensive, or something calculating, what she actually saw was something rawer than any of that. He looked like a man who had spent the last 40 minutes having a realization he would have very much preferred not to have. Emma, he said. They looked at each other. I didn't know, Daniel said. He gestured slightly vaguely at the room. When I made the decision yesterday, I didn't know who he was. Does it matter who he was? Emma asked. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. He looked back at the room, at the people in his booths, at Cheryl laughing with the woman with braids, at the steady, controlled chaos of a kitchen running at full capacity. No, he said finally, very quietly. I don't suppose it does. Emma looked at him for a moment. She thought about all the things she could say. She thought about 3 years of early mornings and covered shifts, in the specific way Daniel had said your values aren't a good fit, the careful, controlled precision of a man delivering a verdict. She chose the thing that was true instead of the thing that would have been satisfying. You weren't wrong that you're responsible for how this place looks, she said. You're the manager. That's real. But what something looks like and what it is, those aren't always the same thing. Daniel was quiet. He was a man who needed breakfast, Emma said. That's what he was. I saw that. I wish you could have. Daniel looked at her. Something in his face moved in a way she hadn't seen it move before, some older and less defended part of him coming briefly to the surface. I called the owner this morning, he said. Emma hadn't expected that. Mr. Reynolds, Daniel continued, I called him and told him what I did and why, and he stopped. His jaw tightened. I told him he should hear it from me first. That surprised her. She hadn't credited Daniel with the capacity for that. What did he say? She asked. He said he was coming in, Daniel said. He's on his way now. Emma nodded slowly. Emma, Daniel held her gaze. I owe you an apology that I don't know how to give properly. I want you to know that. She studied him. She was looking for the calculation in it, the self-preservation, the career management. She found some of it. But underneath that, and this surprised her more than anything else had this morning, she found something genuine. A man who had stood in a doorway for 40 minutes watching the consequence of his own smallness walk through his dining room and had arrived perhaps for the first time at an honest accounting of what he'd done. I know, she said. She walked back out into the dining room. The twist came 40 minutes later. Emma was sitting at the counter. Patty had put her there with a cup of coffee and the quiet authority of a woman who understood that Emma needed to be still for a few minutes when Jack came and sat on the stool next to her. He had been moving through the room since they'd arrived, steady and unhurried, exchanging words with people, occasionally stopping to clap a hand on someone's shoulder or lean in to listen to something. He moved through the room the way a man moves through a room that belongs to him, in some fundamental way that has nothing to do with ownership. He sat down. He accepted the coffee Patty brought him without asking. Can I tell you something? He said. Emma looked at him. Yeah. The morning I came into your diner, he said, I wasn't just tired. He set his coffee down. I'd been on the road for 4 days, riding alone. I do that sometimes, when things build up and I need to think. My wife passed last March. Emma went very still. I'm sorry, she said. 41 years, he said, simply, not performing grief, just stating the length of something that was now absent. Her name was Ruth. He was quiet for a moment. She was the one who always said I was too hard on people who tried to help me, that I made it too difficult for anyone to do a kindness to me, that I'd turned self-sufficiency into a kind of armor. Her word, armor. Emma didn't say anything. The morning I came in, Jack continued, I was in a bad way. The back, yes, but the back was the least of it. I was on the road because I couldn't figure out what to do with myself in a house where 41 years was suddenly missing. He picked up his coffee, set it down again. And then this woman, he stopped, looked at Emma directly. This woman I'd never met looked at me, and she didn't see the vest, and she didn't see the reputation, and she didn't see whatever story she might have told herself about what kind of man I was. She just saw a man who needed to sit down. And she talked to me like I was a person. Just flat out like I was a person. Emma felt something press hard behind her eyes. Ruth would have done the same, he said. That's what I kept thinking when I left. Ruth would have done exactly the same thing. The noise of the dining continued around them. 200 people eating breakfast, chrome and coffee and bacon, and the ordinary beautiful noise of a full room. I'm sorry about Ruth, Emma said. Thank you, he said. Then with the quiet conviction of someone who has decided something, she would have liked you, Emma. Iman looked down at her coffee. She held herself very still. She would not cry in the Golden Oak Diner with 200 people in it. That was a decision she made and held with both hands. Jack, she said, thank you for all of this, for doing what you did. I told you, he said. I just told the truth. You did more than that. He considered this. Maybe, he said, but the thing is, and I need you to understand this, the reason any of this happened isn't me. It isn't because of who I know or what my name carries. It's because what you did was genuinely remarkable. And remarkable things, when they're told truthfully, tend to travel on their own. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, my brother said something similar. Smart kid. He is, she smiled, a real one. How's he doing? Jack said. And the question landed with a naturalness that surprised her, as if Tyler were someone he had known about for longer than the brief exchange of information that must have traveled through whatever channel brought all this together. Some days better than others, Emma said. The pain is unpredictable. Jack nodded. I know someone, he said. Neurology. Worked with him for years after I had a fall back in the 90s. He's in Knoxville. Good man, honest. I want to give you his number. Emma stared at him. If Tyler's open to it, Jack said. No obligation. I know people, and sometimes knowing people is useful. Jack. It's not payment, he said, anticipating her. I'm not paying you back. I'm just an old man with a large phone book doing what old men with large phone books do. Emma laughed. It came out sudden and real and surprised both of them. Okay, she said. Yes, thank you. Good. They sat for a moment in the noise and warmth of the diner. Then the door opened and Michael Reynolds walked in. Emma had never met Michael Reynolds in person, though she'd worked for his diner for 3 years. He communicated primarily through Daniel, and his appearances at the Golden Oak were occasional, and always announced in advance the visits of an owner who treated the business as an investment rather than a presence. She'd seen photographs of a man in his late 50s, stocky and direct-looking, the kind of face that didn't waste expressions. The photograph hadn't been wrong. He was shorter than she'd imagined, and moved faster, cutting through the crowded dining room with the economical purpose of a man who didn't waste motion. His eyes moved around the room continuously, taking everything in, and his expression was unreadable but not hostile. He saw Emma at the counter. He came straight to her. Emma Parker, he said. Mr. Reynolds, she said. He looked around the room, at the booths full of writers, at Cheryl still moving fast behind the counter, at Kevin visible through the kitchen window working flat out. How long has this been going on, he asked. Since about 7, Emma said. They came at sunrise. Reynolds absorbed this. How many? Around 200, Emma said. I'm told. He looked at her, then at the room, then back at her. Because you bought a man breakfast, he said. Because I bought Jack Walker breakfast, Emma said, and Daniel fired me for it. Reynolds was quiet. His jaw moved slightly, some internal calculation working itself through. Where's Daniel, he said. Back of house, Emma said. He's been there most of the morning. Reynolds nodded. Didn't move immediately. His eyes went around the room one more time. She watched him see what she'd seen, not a disruption, not a problem, not a PR crisis waiting to be managed. A full dining room, happy customers, staff working hard and not falling apart. The ordinary miracle of a business doing exactly what a business was supposed to do, multiplied by some factor she didn't have a formula for. I'd like to talk to you, Reynolds said to Emma, and to Jack Walker if he's here. He's here, Emma said. She nodded to where Jack had moved to a booth near the back. Give me 20 minutes with Daniel first, Reynolds said. Then can we sit down, the 3 of us? Emma looked at him carefully. She was doing the same thing as she'd done with Daniel an hour ago, looking for the calculation, the damage control, the self-interest dressed in better clothes. She found some of it. Reynolds was a businessman and businessmen managed situations. That was real. But she also found something else. A man who was looking at a room full of people and understanding in the specific way you understand things when the evidence is physically in front of you that something had happened in his diner that he had not been present for and that had cost him something important, not commercially, though there was that too, but something more than that, something he was still working out how to name. 20 minutes, Emma said. I'll be here. Reynolds went to find Daniel. Patty materialized at Emma's elbow with a coffee refill she hadn't asked for. Well, Patty said. Well, Emma agreed. This is the most people I've served in 30 years of waitressing. How's the kitchen holding up? Kevin has transcended, Patty said. I think he's actually enjoying himself. He keeps making extra biscuits. Emma looked toward the kitchen. She could see Kevin's silhouette through the window moving with a kind of fluid efficiency she'd never seen from him on a normal Tuesday. Patty, Emma said, yeah. When Reynolds comes back out, whatever he offers me, I'm going to ask for one thing before I agree to anything. Patty looked at her. What thing, Hyam? Emma turned to face her. I'm going to ask him what happens to this place when the bikes leave and it's just a regular Thursday again. What actually changes? Because if the answer is nothing, if the answer is we go back to the same management, making the same decisions, and this morning was just a very unusual breakfast, then no job title is worth coming back for. Patty held her gaze for a moment. That's the right question, she said quietly. I know, Emma said. The 20 minutes felt longer. She spent them at the counter, nursing her coffee, watching the room. She watched a man in his 70s with a graying ponytail teach a joke to one of the busboys, a kid named Marcus, who was 19 and shy, and who laughed with his whole face in the way only 19-year-olds still do, unguarded and whole. She watched a woman with a sleeve of tattoos leave a $50 tip on a $20 order and catch Emma watching her and say without self-consciousness, kindness should compound, and then walk out through the door. She watched Cheryl, who had never in 3 years been anything other than professionally pleasant, actually, hug a customer goodbye when a group of 4 got up to leave and mean it the way you mean a hug when something has shifted in you. She watched all of it. She filed all of it. She was still watching when Reynolds came back out. His face had changed. The calculation was still there. It would always be there. It was built into the architecture of the man, but it had moved to accommodate something else. Something had been reorganized. He sat down at the counter 2 stools from her. Jack came back too, moving through the room and settling on the stool on her other side, and for a moment Emma Parker sat between these 2 men, the old biker who had asked nothing from the world and gotten something unexpected anyway, and the diner owner who had operated his business at a distance until the distance proved unsustainable, and she felt in that narrow space between them the weight of what she was being asked to step into. Reynolds looked at her. I want to talk about what comes next, he said. I have a question first, Emma said. She asked him what she told Patty she would ask, straight and plain just like that. What happens to this place when the bikes leave? What actually changes? What does Tuesday look like? And the Tuesday after that, Reynolds was quiet for a moment. That's the right question, he said. Daniel said the same thing in there, actually, just differently. He said he'd been managing appearances instead of managing people. Reynolds looked at the table. He also said that you could have made yesterday very loud and very public, and you chose not to. It wasn't my noise to make, Emma said. Reynolds looked at her. I want to offer you assistant manager, he said, but I want to be clear that the offer isn't contingent on what happened today. The offer is contingent on the fact that you're good at what you do and you understand this place in a way that the current management clearly doesn't. He paused. I'd also like to talk about some operational changes, about how we train people to see customers, about what that actually means in practice. Emma looked at him carefully. And Daniel, she said. Reynolds was quiet for a moment. Daniel stays, but things change. How they change depends on whether he's willing to change with them. He met her eyes. He made a mistake. He owned it. That matters to me. Emma thought about the Daniel she'd seen in the kitchen doorway. The man who'd stood there for 40 minutes watching the consequence of his own smallness. The man who'd called Reynolds before Reynolds called him. Okay, she said. Okay, you'll take it, Reynolds said. Okay, I'll think about it seriously, Emma said. Today was enormous, and I don't want to make permanent decisions in the middle of something enormous. Reynolds almost smiled. Fair enough. Jack, who had been quiet through all of this, said, She'll give you an answer by end of week. Reynolds looked at him. Will she? Reynolds said. She will, Jack said, completely calm. Emma looked at Jack. Jack looked at the pie case. The cherry pie any good? He asked Patty, who had appeared from nowhere on the other side of the counter. Made fresh this morning, Patty said. I'll have a slice, Jack said. Reynolds looked at Emma. Emma looked at the room, at the full booths, at Marcus laughing, at the $50 tip woman already gone, her generosity left behind like something planted. At Kevin making extra biscuits, at Patty cutting at a room full of people who had come from 7 states to have breakfast in a diner where one young woman had once spent $23 on someone she'd never met. She thought about something Jack had said that morning. Remarkable things, when they're told truthfully, tend to travel on their own. She thought about Ruth, 41 years in armor, and a broken-down bike 8 miles south on the highway. She thought about Tyler saying, "You did exactly right, Emma, whatever happens." She thought about the November wind pressing against her windows in the dark. She thought about what she would need from Michael Reynolds and what she was capable of building inside a place she already knew, and what it would mean to build it right, rather than just accept the version being offered. She turned back to Reynolds. "I'll need certain things," she said, "in writing, about how the training changes, about what the standards actually are. Not appearances, actual standards for how people are treated in here." Reynolds nodded slowly. "I can do that." "Then we have something to talk about by end of week," Emma said. She picked up her coffee. Outside, she could hear engines. Some of them were leaving now. The morning was thinning out the enormous collective breakfast, slowly releasing people, gathering their things in their jackets, and heading back out into the cold November day, back to their own states and their own roads and their own lives. The sound of engines igniting one by one, and then in small groups pulling out of the lot and merging back onto the highway, the sound gradually diminishing, dispersing back into the world it had come from. Emma listened to it, the sound of 200 people deciding that one simple, real, uncalculated act of kindness was worth showing up for. She listened until she couldn't hear it anymore. She didn't move. She just held it. The last engine faded somewhere around 10:40 in the morning. Emma heard it go, a single bike pulling out of the lot, the sound rising briefly and then dissolving into the highway noise, and then into nothing. And she felt the absence of it the way you feel the absence of a sound you'd gotten used to, the particular quiet that follows something large. The diner was still half full, not with riders, with regular customers who had come in mid-morning and found booths available for the first time and sat down without knowing quite what they'd walked into, only that the energy of the room was different from usual, charged with something they couldn't name but could feel. Cheryl was still behind the counter. Kevin was in the kitchen. Patty was moving between tables with the specific tiredness of someone who had just run a marathon and hadn't fully registered it yet because the adrenaline was still doing its job. Emma was still at the counter. She hadn't moved in 40 minutes. She had watched the room empty gradually and refill with different people, and she had sat with her coffee going cold in her hands, and she had thought about the things Reynolds said and the things she'd asked for, and the way Jack had announced without being asked that she'd have an answer by end of week, as if her timeline was simply a fact he had decided to confirm. She had almost smiled at that. Almost. Reynolds had left 20 minutes ago with his card on the counter in front of her, and a handshake that was brief and firm, and carried in it, she thought, a genuine quality of accountability. He was a man recalibrating. She could see the machinery of it working in him. Whether the recalibration would hold past the novelty of this morning, past the adrenaline of 200 bikes in his parking lot, and the story that would get told about it, that was the question she couldn't answer from a counter stool on a Thursday in November. She was still thinking about it when Daniel appeared. Not from the kitchen this time. From the hallway near the back, moving toward her with the deliberate, slightly effortful walk of a man who has made a decision to do something uncomfortable and is executing it before he can change his mind. He sat on the stool Reynolds had vacated. He put both hands on the counter. "I want to say it properly," he said, "not on the phone, in person." Emma looked at him. "I was wrong," Daniel said. He said it flat and direct, without the careful management she'd heard on the phone, without the orchestrated precision of a man protecting his position. Just the words landed plainly. "I looked at a man in pain and decided his appearance was more important than his condition. And I punished you for seeing past it. That was wrong. I'm telling you that directly." Emma held his gaze for a moment. "Okay," she said. "That's all you're going to give me?" He said it without resentment, more like a man bracing himself for something and discovering the thing hadn't arrived. "What else do you want me to say, Daniel?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he exhaled. "Nothing, I suppose. He stopped, looked at his hands on the counter. "I've been running this diner for 4 years, and I've prided myself on running it well. Clean, orderly, good reviews, consistent. And today I sat in the back and watched 200 people fill my dining room and spend their money here and treat the staff with more basic decency than I showed you on Tuesday." He looked up. "That's a hard thing to sit with." Emma watched him. She thought about what Reynolds had said. Daniel made a mistake. He owned it. That matters to me. She thought about her own capacity for giving people the benefit of an honest reckoning. She thought about what she told Jack when he first tried to refuse the breakfast she'd paid for. She told him to eat before it got cold. She had walked away before he could argue. She had let him be where he was without requiring him to perform gratitude first. She tried to apply the same principle now. "I believe you," she said. "I'm not saying that to make you feel better. I'm saying it because I think you mean it, and I think it cost you something to come out here and say it." Daniel nodded. "Once." Slowly. "What happens in a week," Emma said, "when this is just another Thursday and there are no bikes in the parking lot and someone walks in who makes you uncomfortable in some way you can't immediately justify? What happens then?" "I don't know," Daniel said. And the honesty of it, the flat refusal to give her a reassuring answer he didn't believe, caught her off guard. "That's the right answer," she said. He frowned slightly. "If you'd told me you'd changed," Emma said, "I wouldn't have believed you. Not today, not after one morning, but you not knowing that's real, that's where change actually starts." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his expression that she couldn't fully categorize. Not gratitude exactly. More like the expression of a man who had expected a reckoning and received instead something that required more from him than punishment would have. "Reynolds wants me to work on some things with you," he said. "Staff training, customer standards. He said you have conditions." "I have requirements," Emma corrected gently. "There's a difference." A ghost of something crossed Daniel's face that might, under very different circumstances, have been the beginning of a smile. "Noted," he said. He got up. He went back to his office. Emma sat with her cold coffee. Patty leaned across the counter and swapped it for a fresh cup without a word. "Thank you," Emma said. "Don't thank me," Patty said. "I should have done it Tuesday." They looked at each other. "You're coming back, aren't you?" Patty said. "Not a question." "Probably," Emma said. "Good," Patty said. Then, with the particular bluntness that Emma had spent 3 years both tolerating and deeply appreciating, "Because Kevin's biscuits are getting cold, and someone needs to tell the lunch crowd about them." Emma laughed for the second time that morning. Both times had surprised her. She called Tyler from the parking lot. He answered before the first ring finished, which meant he'd been holding his phone, which meant he'd been awake and waiting and not sleeping the way his doctor kept telling him he needed to. "Tell me everything," Tyler said. So she did. She told him about Jack on the stool next to her and Ruth, 41 years in armor. She told him about Reynolds arriving in the 20 minutes with Daniel. She told him about the offer and her conditions and the end-of-week deadline that Jack had established without being asked. She told him about the last engine going quiet and the particular feeling of that silence. Tyler listened to all of it without interrupting, which was unusual for him. Tyler was a man who engaged with stories actively, who asked questions and made observations and occasionally finished sentences, and his silence through Emma's telling of all this was its own kind of communication. When she finished, he said, "He told you about his wife." "Ruth," Emma said, 41 years. "And he said she would have liked you." "He said she would have done the same thing I did." Tyler was quiet for a moment. "Emma, do you understand what it means for a man like that to tell you something like that?" "I think so." "No," Tyler said. "I mean, really understand it, not just as a nice thing he said. He's been on the road for 4 days because he doesn't know what to do with himself without her. He walked into your diner because his bike broke down. He wasn't looking for anything. He wasn't planning anything. And then you looked at him and you saw a person and you fed him breakfast and you called him Jack and you let him be what he was. And he went away carrying that, and it was the first thing in how long?" Tyler stopped. "It was the first time since March that someone had given him something without him asking for it, without any setup or agenda or prior relationship. Just clean and straight." Emma was sitting in her car now, the engine off her breath, making small shapes in the cold. "He gave it back," she said quietly. 200 people. "Because it meant something to him," Tyler said. "Because you meant something to him. You were real, Emma. In a world where things get performed at him all the time, the respect, the deference, the careful treatment of his reputation, you were just real." Emma closed her eyes. She sat in the cold and dark of her car, and she thought about her mother counting coins at the kitchen table. She thought about Tyler's first conscious words to her in the hospital room, which were not her name and not a question about what had happened, but simply fuzzily with the medication still heavy in his voice. "You're still here." And she'd said yes. She was still there. She would always be there. She thought about the woman who'd left $50 on a $20 order and said kindness should compound. "Tyler," she said. "Yeah. Jack said he knows a neurologist in Knoxville. He wants to give me the number." Silence on Tyler's end. "A good one," he said, Emma continued. "Not general practice. Someone who works with nerve damage specifically. He said he's worked with him personally." More silence. "Tyler," Emma said. Don't what? Don't argue about it because you think it's charity." "I'm not gonna argue," Tyler said. His voice was different now, quieter and more careful. "Because it's not charity," Emma said. "It's a man with a large phone book doing what men with large phone books do." That's a direct quote. Tyler made a sound, something between a breath and a laugh. "Okay," he said. "Okay, you'll see the neurologist." "Okay, I'll think about seeing the neurologist." "Tyler." "Emma." He matched her tone exactly, then softer. "Yes, okay, yes." She exhaled. "Good," she said. "Emma," Tyler said. "Yeah. You did something real on Tuesday. A small real thing, and it grew into something enormous. But I want you to remember," he paused, gathering the thought. "I want you to remember that the enormous thing isn't the point. The point was the small, real thing. The $23 and the plate of eggs in the second booth from the back. That's the thing. Everything else is just what happened because of it." Emma pressed her fingers to her eyes. "I know," she said. "I just want you to stay that person," Tyler said. "The one who sees a man gripping a door frame and thinks to bring him water. Don't let today make it complicated. It was simple. It stays simple." "It stays simple," Emma agreed. She started the car. She drove home. The call from Jack came at 3 in the afternoon. She had expected it in the loose way you expect things when the day has had a logic to it, and the logic seems to be building towards something. She answered immediately. "You doing all right?" he said. Their greeting, she was beginning to understand, would always be this. "Better," she said. "You better," he said. There was a brief, comfortable silence. "I want to give you that number," he said, "for Knoxville." "I know," Emma said. Tyler said yes. "Good." She could hear the quiet satisfaction in it, not proud, not pleased with himself, just satisfied in the way of someone who has moved a useful thing into position. "His name is Dr. Warren Hale. Tell him Jack sent you. He'll know what that means." "What does it mean?" Emma said. "It means Warren owes me about 15 years of favors, and he should expect to start paying them back," Jack said. Emma wrote down the name. Jack. "Yeah. Was today what you expected?" A long pause. "No," Jack said finally. "I expected the room to fill up. I expected the guys to be decent. They're always decent when it matters." Another pause. "I didn't expect Reynolds to come in. I didn't expect Daniel to do what he did. I didn't expect—" He stopped. "You know what I didn't expect? Tell me." "I didn't expect it to feel like Ruth," he said. "I didn't expect to sit in that diner and feel like she was still—" He stopped again, cleared his throat. When his voice came back, it was the same as always, measured and deep and giving very little away, except that it was giving something away, and they both knew it. "She was the heart of everything for 41 years. I've been trying to figure out what you do with a life after the heart goes out of it. And today I sat in that diner and watched a room full of people eat breakfast because one young woman spent $23 without thinking twice about it, and I thought—" He stopped for the third time, and this time the silence lasted long enough that Emma held the phone closer. "I thought Ruth would have said, 'That's it. That's the whole answer.' You just keep doing that. You just keep seeing people and feeding them and letting them be what they are." Emma held very still. Outside her window, the November light was going golden and flat the late afternoon of a short day. "I think she would have said that," Emma said. "Yeah," Jack said. "Me too." They sat for a moment in the silence of that. Then Jack said in a different register, practical and forward-facing, "Reynolds give you a number for the offer." "He gave me a title," Emma said, "assistant manager." "That's a title?" Jack said. "What about the actual things you need?" Emma felt something warm move through her chest. The straightforwardness of it, The way he'd cut straight to what mattered. I told him I need the training changes in writing, she said. I need actual accountability structures for how staff handles customers. Not a speech about values, documented procedures, something with teeth. Good. I also told him I need a week to decide. You have until Friday, Jack said. Don't make them wait past Friday, not because they deserve the consideration, but because you're not a person who leaves things dangling. Emma smiled. You've known me for 3 days. I know enough, he said, without apology and without bravado, just flat confidence. She thought about what he'd said about Ruth being the heart of everything. She thought about what Tyler had said about staying simple. She thought about Daniel's hands flat on the counter and Patty swapping out her cold coffee and Kevin making extra biscuits, because for the first time in his cooking life, the demand was there and the room wanted feeding. Jack, she said, yeah. Thank you for calling people, for telling them what happened. I know you said you just told the truth, but the way you told it, the fact that you thought it was worth telling, that meant something. A pause. Ruth always said I was better at doing things than saying things, Jack said. So I'll just say, you're welcome and leave it there. That works, Emma said. Get some rest, he said. You've had a large day. She had. She went to sleep that night without any trouble at all. The week that followed had its own rhythm, different from anything that had come before it. Emma came to the diner on Friday not as an employee and not quite as a visitor, but as something in between, a person in negotiation with a place about what their future relationship was going to look like. Reynolds had put together a document. She hadn't expected it to be thoughtful, and then she'd read it and been surprised. It wasn't perfect. There were things that needed to be stronger, language that was too vague in places, accountability measures that were more suggestions than requirements. But it was real. It was an actual attempt by a man who ran a business at a comfortable distance to take what had happened in his diner on a Thursday morning and translate it into something structural. She sat with Reynolds and Daniel at a table in the back, the same table she'd wiped down 1,000 times, and they went through it line by line. Daniel spoke carefully. He offered changes in some places. He pushed back in others, not defensively, but practically the pushback of a man who actually knew the operations of the place and understood what was implementable. It was, Emma thought, the most useful version of Daniel she had ever seen. Stripped of the pretension to authority he'd built up over 4 years of crossing his arms in doorways, he was actually competent. He actually knew this diner in ways that mattered. She said so. Not diplomatically, just directly. You know this place, she said. You've been here 4 years and you know how it runs. That's not nothing. I'm going to need that. Daniel looked at her as if she'd done something unexpected to him. Thank you, he said, quietly. Reynolds looked between them and something in his expression relaxed fractionally. By the end of 2 hours, they had a revised document. Emma took it home. She called Tyler. She read him every significant point. Tyler listened and asked 3 specific questions, all of them good. One of them better than anything Emma had thought of herself, which she then added to the document in the margin with a note to raise it with Reynolds. She called Jack. How does it look? He said. Better than I expected, she said. Still has soft spots, but nothing I can't work with. Are you going to sign it? Emma looked at the document on her kitchen table. She looked at the margins where she'd made notes. She looked at the lines she'd written in red ink at the top. What does Tuesday look like? Yes, she said. I'm going to sign it. Good, Jack said. Tell them Monday. You said Friday. That was before I knew the document needed more work, he said. Tell them Monday. Emma shook her head slowly. You're very comfortable deciding things about my schedule. I'm an old man with opinions, Jack said. Comes with the mileage. She told them Monday. Reynolds accepted this without complaint. Daniel, she was told, through Reynolds, said he was glad she was coming back. She chose to believe him. On Saturday, Tyler called her at 8 in the morning. She answered expecting to hear about his back, about whether it had been a good night or a difficult one, about whether the weather change had done what weather changes sometimes did to the nerve damage. Instead, he said, I called Knoxville. Emma stopped moving. I called Dr. Hale, Tyler said, the one Jack mentioned. I said Jack sent me. And, Emma said, and he knew exactly who Jack was, Tyler said. And he was Emma, he was genuinely warm, not clinic professional, warm. He spent 20 minutes on the phone with me before scheduling even came up. He asked about the injury and the timeline and what treatments I'd had and what had helped and what hadn't. He actually listened to the answers. Emma sat down. He has a slot on the 22nd, Tyler said. He said he wants to look at the imaging from the original surgery and some of the follow-up scans, and he has some ideas about what might be contributing to the chronic pain that my current doctor hasn't addressed. Emma held the phone with both hands. Tyler, she said. I know, he said. His voice had something in it she hadn't heard in 14 months. Not hope exactly. Tyler was too careful for that word now. The accident had taught him to be careful with hope, but something adjacent to it. Something that lived in the same neighborhood. I know. How do you feel, she said. Scared, he said honestly. It's another appointment, another doctor, another round of someone looking at the scans and having ideas. I've had ideas before. He paused. But this felt different. He felt different. And I know it might just be because of everything that's happened this week, and everything feels bigger than it is right now. But I called him and he talked to me like I was a person, and it felt... He stopped. Emma closed her eyes. It felt like getting water and a place to sit down, Tyler said quietly, when I didn't expect it. Emma sat for a long time after they hung up. She sat and she thought about chains. Not the kind that bind, but the kind that connect. The chain that ran from Ruth Walker's 41 years to a broken-down bike on a highway south of Willow Creek, to a cold morning in a door frame and $23 and a plate of scrambled eggs, to 200 engines at sunrise, to a neurologist in Knoxville who had warm in his voice when he answered the phone. She thought about the woman with the sleeve of tattoos who had said kindness should compound. She thought about that word, compound, the way it meant both to add to something and to make it more complex, the way it meant something built from many things gathered together. She thought about her mother counting coins at the kitchen table and how her mother had always known something that Emma was only now beginning to understand in her bones. That kindness wasn't a luxury for people who could afford it. That kindness was the structure underneath everything else, the load-bearing wall, the thing that held the weight when everything around it was uncertain. She'd spent $23 on a stranger. She had not expected it to hold so much. On Sunday evening, Jack called one more time. You ready for Monday, he said. Almost, Emma said. I need to ask you something first. Go ahead. Why did you stay, she said. Thursday morning, after Reynolds left and after the riders started going, you could have left. You'd done what you came to do, but you stayed at the counter for another hour. A pause. I was eating cherry pie, Jack said. Emma smiled. Jack, a longer pause. I didn't want to leave yet, he said. Simple, direct, the way he said things when he was being truest. It was the first morning in 8 months that I didn't want to leave a place. I was somewhere that felt like something. He stopped. Ruth would have called it home energy. She had a phrase for everything. Emma thought about that. Home energy, she repeated. She meant the feeling of a place where people are actually looking at each other, Jack said. Not just occupying the same space, actually seeing each other. Another pause. Your diner had that on Thursday. Maybe it didn't before, but it had it Thursday. It'll have it again, Emma said. She said it with the particular quiet certainty of a commitment rather than a hope. Jack was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. That's why I stayed. They said goodnight. Emma set her phone on the nightstand. She looked at the ceiling in the dark of her apartment, and she thought about Monday. About walking back through the door of the Golden Oak. About Daniel and his hands flat on the counter, and Reynolds and his document, and Patty, and Kevin and Marcus, who laughed with his whole face, and the woman who said kindness should compound. She thought about all of it. She thought about what it meant to build something real inside a place that had broken something real. She thought about Tuesday, the ordinary Tuesday that would follow Monday, and the Tuesday after that, the long, undramatic series of Tuesdays that would be the actual test of everything that had happened this week. She was not afraid of Tuesdays. She had been built for them. She turned off the light. She closed her eyes. And in the quiet of a Sunday night in November in a small apartment in Willow Creek, Tennessee, where the heating bill was covered and Tyler's appointment was on the 22nd and the document was signed and Monday was waiting, Emma Parker slept the clean and certain sleep of a woman who had paid $23 for something and received in return everything that mattered. Monday came the way Mondays always came, without ceremony, without announcement, with the same cold November light and the same drive through the same streets and the same bell above the same door. Emma arrived at 6:15, 15 minutes earlier than her old shift had required. She stood for a moment just inside the door with her coat still on, and she looked at the Golden Oak Diner, the way you look at a place when you're deciding something about it, not casually, not habitually, but with the deliberate attention of someone making a choice to be present. The booths, the counter, the pie case, the smell of coffee already brewing because Kevin came in at 5:30 and started the pots before anything else, which was something she'd always known and never said thank you for. She made a note to fix that. Patty was already there, reading glasses pushed up on her head, and when she saw Emma come through the door, she stopped what she was doing and stood very still for exactly 1 second. Then she crossed the room and took Emma by both shoulders and looked at her the way a person looks at someone they are genuinely relieved to see. "Welcome back," Patty said. "Thank you," Emma said. "Daniel's already in," Patty added. Quieter. "He came in at 6. He never comes in at 6. Emma absorbed that. "How does he seem?" "Different," Patty said. And then with the particular economy of a woman who spent her life observing people, quieter, in a good way, like someone turned the volume down on something that was always running too loud. Emma nodded. She took off her coat. She went to find Daniel. He was in his office, the repurposed storage room with the desk in the corner and the window that didn't open, and he was looking at the training document Reynolds had sent over the revised version with Emma's notes incorporated, printed in a folder on his desk. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. "Emma," he said. "Daniel," she said. They looked at each other across the small distance of his office and across the larger distance of what had happened between them in the last week and across the distance of who they had each been versus who they were perhaps trying to become, which was not a distance that could be fully crossed in a Monday morning, but could at least be acknowledged. "I marked some things in the document," Daniel said. He pushed the folder toward her slightly. "Pages 4 and 7. I think there are ways to make the language stronger, more specific." Emma came in and looked at the pages he'd marked. He was right. The language was more specific with his additions, more usable. "Good catches," she said. He nodded. He was not performing humility. He was just doing the work. She respected that. "I want to talk to the staff this morning," Emma said, "before we open. All of them together." Daniel looked at her. "About the document. About what the document is trying to say," Emma said. "The document is important, but a document doesn't change how a person feels when they walk through that door. What changes that is what the people inside decide to see." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "You want me there," he said. She had expected him to offer to lead it, to assume the managerial role automatically by reflex. He hadn't. That was itself a change. "Yes," she said, "but you don't have to say anything. Just be there." He nodded. "I'll be there." She gathered everyone in the dining room at 6:45. Kevin came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron, and stood near the pass-through with his arms crossed but his face open. Cheryl sat on a counter stool. Marcus stood near the window, hands in his back pockets, 19, and uncertain in the way of someone who didn't know if this kind of meeting was supposed to be bad news. Two other waitstaff, Donna, who'd worked there longer than anyone except Patty, and a young man named Greg, who'd started 3 months ago and was still learning the rhythms of the place, stood near the back booth. Daniel stood by the hallway. Emma stood at the center of the room. She didn't have notes. She looked around at the people who worked in this diner, and she thought about what she actually wanted to say, which was not a speech about values or a recitation of policy language, but something closer to what Tyler had told her on the phone. Stay simple, stay real. "I'm not going to talk for long," she said. "I want to tell you what I think happened here last week, and then I want to tell you what I think it means for the rest of the time we're here." She looked at each of them in turn, not performing connection, just making it. "Last Tuesday I bought a man breakfast because he looked like he needed it," she said. "That's the whole beginning. That's where everything started. Not with a plan, not with a statement, just with looking at a person and seeing what was actually in front of me." She paused. 200 people showed up here on Thursday because that one thing traveled," she said. "It traveled because it was genuine, because there was nothing behind it except the thing itself. And when something is genuinely itself, when a person is genuinely themselves in the act of giving something to another person, people feel that, even when they're not in the room, even when they only hear about it secondhand. Kevin shifted slightly. Cheryl's hands were folded in her lap. Here's what I want from us, Emma said. I want us to actually see the people who come through that door. Not just take their orders. Not just be polite, because polite is a form of distance. Polite means you're managing someone rather than meeting them. I want us to actually see them. When someone comes in and they look like they're having a hard time, I want us to notice. When someone needs a minute, I want us to give it without making them feel like they're inconveniencing us. When someone is different from what we expect, different from the usual crowd, different looking, different sounding, I want us to start there. She stopped. With the difference, not in spite of it, with it. Because what makes a person different is usually the most interesting thing about them. Marcus was nodding, slowly, unconsciously, the way people nod when something is landing. I'm not asking for perfection, Emma said. I'm not asking for policy compliance. I'm asking you to come in every morning and decide to actually be here, to actually be in the room with whoever walks through the door. That's it. She looked at Daniel. He was standing very still. His arms were not crossed. His hands were at his sides. He was listening with his whole body. I know last week was unusual, Emma said. I know 200 bikes don't park outside every Thursday. But I don't want us to look back on last Thursday as something exceptional. I want it to be the baseline. I want every customer who walked in here last Thursday and felt welcomed and seen and genuinely attended to, I want that to be what every person feels, every Tuesday, every regular morning. That's the goal. She stopped. She looked around the room. Any questions? She said. Silence for a moment. Then Kevin said from the kitchen door, Can I start the biscuits? Something eased in the room. A collective exhale. Please, Emma said. Kevin went back to the kitchen. Marcus said almost to himself, I liked last Thursday. Me too, Emma said. Let's build on it. The morning rush came in at 7:15, exactly as it always had. The construction crews and the highway workers in the county hospital shift change crowd. The people who ordered by habit and sat in their usual seats and drank coffee the way they drank coffee every morning. Nothing dramatic, nothing exceptional, just people who needed breakfast before their day started. Emma was on the floor, not in an office, not managing from a distance. On the floor, taking orders and refilling coffee, and moving through the familiar geometry of the diner with the easy fluency of someone who had been doing it for 3 years and hadn't lost any of it in the week she'd been gone. She noticed things. She noticed a man at table 4 who was holding his coffee with both hands and staring at the window with the particular vacancy of someone who had received bad news and hadn't processed it yet. She checked his order, brought it without comment, refilled his water, and on her second pass said quietly, You doing okay today? Not intrusively, just the question offered like a glass of water. He looked up at her. He said, Rough week. She said, I hear that. She moved on without forcing it. But on her way past 10 minutes later, she put a small slice of pie on the edge of his table without being asked and said, On the house. He looked at the pie and then at her, and something in his face shifted. Thank you, he said, like he meant it. She moved on. She noticed Cheryl at the counter with a woman who was struggling with the menu because Emma realized after a moment the woman couldn't read the small print without her glasses and was too embarrassed to say so. Emma came over and read her the specials out loud naturally, as if she did it for everyone, and the woman's shoulders dropped 2 inches in relief. She noticed Marcus taking a group's order and losing the thread slightly. A large table complicated modifications, the nervous energy of a kid who was still calibrating his memory for multiples, and she stepped in beside him quietly and said, I'll grab that end, without making it a correction, and together they got the order right, and Marcus shot her a grateful look she pretended not to see because that was the kindest thing she could do. She noticed Daniel. Daniel was moving through the diner in a way she hadn't seen him move before, not crossing his arms in doorways, not cataloging for error. He was moving through the room like someone who was trying consciously and with visible effort to do what Emma had described to actually be in the room. He stopped at a table where 2 elderly women were sharing a pot of tea and exchanged a brief conversation with them, leaning down slightly to hear the smaller woman who spoke softly. He came back to the counter and said to Patty without particular drama, The women at 9 need more hot water. And Patty took the kettle without a word and went And Emma, watching this from across the room, thought, there it is. That small, quiet, unremarkable thing. That's exactly it. By 9 o'clock, the rush had thinned. By 9:30, the diner had settled into the mid-morning quiet of a place between waves. A few tables occupied the kitchen. No longer at full speed, the particular piece of a restaurant breathing. Emma stood at the counter with a cup of coffee. Patty stood next to her. "How are you feeling?" Patty said. "Good," Emma said, and then checking herself the way she always did. "Actually good, not managed good, actually." Patty looked at the room. "You know what's different," Patty said. "Tell me." "Kevin made biscuits again," Patty said. "He didn't have to. We weren't that slammed. He just made them." She paused. "He's been here 11 years, and I've never seen him make extra biscuits on a slow morning." Emma looked toward the kitchen. "Maybe he's building on Thursday," she said. "Maybe he is," Patty said. The call came at 11. Emma was in the back doing inventory, one of the less romantic aspects of the assistant manager role that she had nonetheless accepted as part of the full reality of the job, when her phone buzzed with Jack's number. She stepped into the hallway. "How was the first morning?" he said. "Good," she said. "Really good, actually. Better than I expected." "What happened?" She told him about the man with bad news and the pie, about the woman who couldn't read the menu, about Marcus and the large table, about Daniel and the hot water for the elderly women. Jack was quiet through all of it. When she finished, he said, "That's it. That's what I was telling you about," he said. "Ruth used to say that a good place doesn't feel like anything specific. It doesn't have one big thing that defines it. It's all the small things running at the same time, all pointing in the same direction. You string enough of those small things and the whole place starts to feel different. The whole room changes." Emma thought about that. "Home energy," she said. "Home energy," he confirmed. She heard him exhale slowly. Something behind the sound of it that she was beginning to recognize, not sadness exactly, but the particular weight of a man carrying an absence that didn't get lighter, only more familiar. "Jack," she said, "how are you doing, really?" A pause that lasted long enough to tell her he was deciding how honest to be. "Some days are long," he said. "Today's not bad. I'm at the shop." She knew he had a motorcycle repair shop outside Nashville, something she'd learned from Carol during one of their subsequent conversations. Being around machines helps, always has, something about things that have a reason for every part. "Tyler's like that with construction," Emma said. "Even now, when he can't do the physical work, he keeps blueprints, studies them. He says understanding how things fit together helps when his body doesn't fit together right." "Smart kid," Jack said. "You keep saying that." "I keep meaning it." A pause. "How's he feeling about the appointment?" "Nervous," Emma said, trying not to be hopeful, hoping anyway. "Hale's good," Jack said. "Firm and simple. I wouldn't have given you the number if I didn't believe that. He's the kind of doctor who listens first and talks second. Those are rare." "I know," Emma said. "Tyler said as much after the phone call." "Good." A pause. "Emma, I want to ask you something." "Go ahead." "The diner," Jack said. "The changes you're making. The things you talked to the staff about this morning. You didn't tell me the details, but I can hear what it was in how you described the morning. The question I want to ask is, do you believe it'll hold?" Emma thought about it seriously. "I don't know if it'll hold in Daniel," she said. "Not completely, not without setbacks. I think he's genuinely trying to see something he's been trained his whole life not to see, and that's hard, and it takes time, and he'll slip, and we'll deal with it when he does." "And Reynolds, yeah. Reynolds sees the business case for it now," Emma said. "I'm not entirely sure he sees the human case, but the business case will hold him for a while, and while he's held by that, we do the work, and maybe the work changes what he sees." "And you," Jack said. "But what holds you?" Emma leaned against the wall of the hallway. "The same thing that paid for the breakfast," she said. A pause. "Yeah," Jack said. "I thought so." The twist that Emma had not anticipated arrived on a Wednesday 9 days after she'd started back. It arrived not as a crisis or a confrontation or another enormous event, but as a letter. A physical letter delivered to the diner in a standard white envelope addressed to Emma Parker, Golden Oak Diner, Willow Creek, Tennessee. No return address. Inside was a single page handwritten in a careful, slightly formal script that belonged to someone who had been taught penmanship at a time when penmanship was taught with rigor. She read it standing at the counter. It was from a woman named Dolores who was 73 years old and lived in a small town in eastern Kentucky. She had seen the story, Emma's story, on a community Facebook page where someone had posted it after hearing it from someone who had ridden to Willow Creek on the Thursday. Dolores' son rode with a small independent club, not the Angels, but connected enough that the story had reached her through him. Dolores wrote that she had read the story 3 times. She wrote that her husband of 47 years had passed in February, 6 weeks before Ruth Walker had passed, and that she had been having the kind of winter that people don't discuss openly because the specific grief of outliving a marriage is something you can't explain to anyone who hasn't lived it. She wrote that she had read about Emma and about Jack and about Ruth, 41 years, and about a broken down bike and $23 and 200 people at sunrise, and that she had sat at her kitchen table and wept. Not from sadness, from something else. Something that didn't have a clean name but lived in the neighborhood of being reminded that the world still had the kind of people in it that you feared it no longer had. She wrote, "I don't know you and you don't know me, and I'm a 73-year-old woman writing a letter to a stranger, which I recognize is an unusual thing. But I wanted you to know that what you did mattered to someone you will never meet in a kitchen in Kentucky at 11 o'clock at night when the house was very quiet. I wanted you to know that kindness travels further than you can see from where you're standing." Emma stood at the counter for a long time after she finished reading. She read it again. She folded it very carefully along its original creases, and she put it in the pocket of her apron close to where she used to keep the $23. Patty had watched the whole thing. "Good letter," Patty said. "Yeah," Emma said. "A good letter." She thought about Dolores at her kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night in eastern Kentucky. She thought about Jack on the road for 4 days because he didn't know what to do with a house where 41 years was missing. She thought about 2 people who had never met carrying the same weight in different states, and the strange invisible thread that ran between them through a diner in Willow Creek and a plate of scrambled eggs and a woman who had looked at a man gripping a door frame and thought to bring him water. She wrote Dolores back that night. She sat at her own kitchen table and she wrote in longhand, which she hadn't done in years, and she told Dolores that she was glad the letter had arrived. She told Dolores about Jack and Ruth. She told Dolores about Tyler and the appointment in Knoxville. She told Dolores about Monday morning and the man with bad news in the pew and the woman who couldn't read the menu and Kevin making extra biscuits because he was building on something. She told Dolores that she was glad there were still people who wrote letters. She sealed it and addressed it and put it on the counter to mail in the morning. Then she sat for a moment in her kitchen. She thought about what Dolores had written, "Kindness travels further than you can see from where you're standing." She thought about standing in the doorway of the Golden Oak 3 years ago, 22 years old, starting a job that was supposed to be temporary, supposed to be just until she figured out something better. She thought about how temporary had turned into 3 years without her noticing, and how she had told herself for much of those 3 years that this wasn't the real thing, yet that the real thing was coming, that she was waiting for circumstances to change before she made the choices that actually mattered. She had spent $23 on a stranger. That was what had changed the circumstances. Not waiting, not planning, not the right moment finally arriving. One small, real, uncalculated act. She went to bed. The 22nd came on a Tuesday. Tyler's appointment with Dr. Warren Hale in Knoxville was at 9 in the morning. Emma had offered to drive him. Tyler had said no firmly without room for negotiation, the particular stubbornness of a younger brother who needed to do some things on his own, and then he'd called her from the parking lot before he went in because apparently doing it on his own didn't mean doing it without telling her he was there. "I'm here," he said. "You nervous?" she said. "Extremely," he said. "Don't tell me not to be." "I wasn't going to," Emma said. "Being nervous is appropriate. It means something matters." "What if he doesn't have anything new?" Tyler said. "What if I sit through the whole thing and at the end, it's just more of the same? More wait and see, more management strategies." He said management strategies with the specific bitterness of someone who had been told that phrase too many times when what they were asking for was relief. "Then we're exactly where we are now," Emma said. "We're no worse off." "I want to be better off," Tyler said. And the rawness of it, the plain, direct, no pretense admission of want from a man who had learned to be very careful with wanting things hit Emma somewhere behind her sternum. "I know," she said. "Go in. Call me when you're out." He called her 3 hours later. She was on her lunch break sitting in the break room at the Golden Oak with a sandwich she'd made at home and her phone face up on the table, unable to eat, watching the minutes. When it rang, she picked up before the vibration finished. "Tyler," she said. He didn't say anything immediately, and in that silence, in the space of 2 or 3 seconds before he spoke, Emma's heart did something complicated and involuntary. "Emma," Tyler said. She waited. "He found something," Tyler said. His voice was doing the thing voices do when a person is holding emotion with both hands, keeping it contained. Not because they're suppressing it, but because they're not ready for it yet, because saying it out loud makes it real, and they need one more second before real. It's treatable. The nerve issue. There's a procedure, not surgery, a targeted injection series very specific to the type of damage. And he showed me the imaging and explained exactly what's been happening, and Emma, he stopped. He said he thinks we can get E to 70% function, maybe more, Sibuyearm. He said 70% is conservative. Emma pressed her hand against her mouth. 70%, Tyler said. I've been at 30 for 14 months. 70% means I could work again. Real work, not construction, maybe, but he mentioned training inspector, certification, structural assessment work. Things that use what I know without requiring what I can't do. Emma was not crying. She had decided not to cry, and she was holding to that decision with the same grip she'd used to hold everything else together for 14 months. When does he want to start? She said. He wants to schedule the first injection in 3 weeks, Tyler said. He said 4 to 6 sessions, spaced 3 weeks apart. He said most patients begin seeing results by the 3rd session. Okay, Emma said. Her voice was very steady. Okay. Emma, Tyler said. Yeah. If you hadn't bought that man breakfast, Tyler said. If you just let him find somewhere else, or let Daniel walk him out. If you'd played it safe and kept your job and none of this happened, I would still be at 30% and I would still have the same doctor who keeps telling me to manage my expectations. And he stopped. His voice caught slightly on the stop. I know that's not why you did it. I know you didn't do it for me. You did it because he was a man who needed to sit down. But the thing is, he stopped again. The thing is that you being who you are changed everything. Not just for you, for me, for Jack, for Dolores in Kentucky, who you've never met, for Patty, who didn't say something on Tuesday and has been trying to make it right every day since, for Marcus and Kevin and the man with bad news at table 4 who got a slice of pie. You didn't plan any of that. You just kept being exactly who you are, and it kept traveling. Emma looked at the ceiling of the break room. She thought about her mother and the coins. She thought about her mother who had been endlessly, stubbornly, almost recklessly kind, and whom Emma had once decided was not smart about it, not strategic enough, giving without plan or protection. She thought about how she had promised herself she would be smarter, more careful, more measured. She thought about $23. Tyler, she said. Yeah. Mom would have done the same thing. A silence. Yeah, Tyler said, soft and certain. She would have done it first. In the weeks that followed, the Golden Oak Diner changed in the way that real changes happen. Not all at once, not in a single dramatic moment, but in the accumulation of small decisions made daily by people who had decided to see things differently. Kevin's biscuits became a permanent fixture on the morning menu, written in by hand on the chalkboard above the counter, because Reynolds walked in one Thursday and asked what was selling, and Kevin said the biscuits, and Reynolds said put them on the board. Kevin did not say thank you. He went back to the kitchen and started a batch, and that was its own kind of thanks. Marcus began to relax. The nervous uncertainty that had characterized his first 3 months started to ease as he found his footing in a room that was increasingly characterized by the feeling Emma had described actually being in the room with whoever walked through the door. He started remembering regulars' orders without writing them down. He started noticing things, small things. The woman who always asked for hot water with her tea but was too polite to ask for it more than once. The retired teacher who came in on Fridays and always looked slightly hopeful when the pie case was visible from the door. Marcus started filling the pie case on Thursday nights, so it was full for Friday mornings. Nobody asked him to. He just started doing it. Daniel came in at 6 every morning. This did not change. He did not go back to standing in doorways with his arms crossed. He developed instead the habit of a slow walk through the room before opening, adjusting small things, straightening chairs, checking the tables. Not inspecting, just present. There was a difference and the staff felt it and responded to it in the way people respond when a room's atmosphere shifts without anyone announcing why. He and Emma were not close, they were not friends. They were colleagues engaged in a shared project, and they treated each other with the particular mutual respect of two people who had said difficult things to each other honestly and had chosen to keep working after. Some mornings they talked for 20 minutes about operations and about staff and about the documents and what was working. Some mornings they simply said good morning and moved through the diner parallel to each other without needing more than that. It was, Emma thought, an honest relationship. More honest than the one they'd had before when Daniel had managed her and she had managed her response to being managed, and neither of them had said the real thing. She preferred honest. Jack called on the first Friday of December. "I'm coming through next week," he said. "The bike's been serviced." Emma smiled at that. "Is your back better?" "The back is the back," he said, which she understood to mean yes, relatively for now. "But let's not make promises. I want to stop in for breakfast, if that's all right." "You're welcome any time," Emma said. "You know that." "I know," he said. "I just like saying it." A pause. "How's your brother?" "First injection was last week," Emma said. "He says he can't feel a difference yet. Dr. Hale says to wait." "Hale's always right about when to wait," Jack said. "It's his best quality." "Tyler's being patient," Emma said. "He's been studying for the inspector certification while he waits. He has a stack of manuals." She paused. "He told me he's thinking about structural load assessment. Commercial buildings." "That's good work," Jack said. "It's good work," Emma agreed. "It's honest, practical work that uses his head instead of his back, and it took a broken-down bike and a plate of eggs and a man from Nashville to put him in the direction of it." Jack was quiet for a moment. "Emma," he said, "yeah. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to hear it straight." "Go ahead." "And Ruth used to say that the people who change things aren't usually the people who mean to change things," Jack said. "They're the people who are just themselves stubbornly and completely in every ordinary moment until enough ordinary moments add up to something that can't be undone." He paused. "You're one of those people. I want you to know that I know that. And I want you to know that this old man with a large phone book is very glad his bike broke down 8 miles south of Willow Creek." Emma stood at the counter of the Golden Oak Diner with the December light coming through the window and the sound of Kevin in the kitchen and the smell of coffee and biscuits and the ordinary beautiful noise of a place that was alive. "I'm glad too," she said. "Good," Jack said. "Save me the second booth from the back." He came in on a Wednesday morning. He walked through the door, and Emma was already moving toward him before she'd consciously decided to crossing the room the way you cross a room to meet someone you know with the ease of established familiarity. He looked better than he had the first time. Not healed, there was no pretending that 41 years of absence healed but present in a way he hadn't fully been on that cold morning in November when he gripped the door frame and tried not to show what it was costing him to stand. He walked in without holding the wall. She noticed. She didn't say anything about it. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he said. She walked him to the second booth from the back, the one that faced the door. She put a menu on the table. She brought him water and coffee without asking. He looked at the coffee. He looked at her. "Same as before," he said. "Same as before," she agreed. She moved to let him be the way she had the first time, giving him space and quiet and the simple, uncomplicated dignity of a man being allowed to sit in a room without having to explain himself. She was halfway back to the counter when he said, "Emma." She turned. He held her gaze across the diner. Through the noise of the morning and the smell of the kitchen and the movement of the other staff and the ordinary Tuesday accumulation of people who needed coffee before they could face their day. "Ruth would have liked it here," he said. "Today, what you've made of this place." Emma stood in the middle of the Golden Oak Diner, and she held that. She held it the way you hold something that is too large to put down and too important to drop. She thought about all of it in the compressed and total way the mind sometimes gathers a whole story into a single moment. The door frame, the $23, the plate of eggs, the phone calls in the dark, the sound of 200 engines at sunrise, Dolores at her kitchen table in Kentucky, Tyler's voice saying 70%. Daniel walking through the room without his arms crossed. Marcus filling the pie case on Thursday nights for the retired teacher who came in on Fridays. Kevin's biscuits on the chalkboard. Patty swapping out cold coffee. The woman who said kindness should compound the man with bad news, who got a slice of pie. The letter she'd written back in longhand. The appointment on the 22nd, what remains when the engines go quiet. What Tuesday looks like when you decide to actually be in the room. All of it from one small, real, uncalculated act. She would have been welcome, Emma said, and she meant it completely. And that was the whole truth of everything. A woman who had nothing to offer but her own clear sight had looked at a man who needed to sit down and had offered him a seat and a meal, and the uncomplicated dignity of being seen, and the world which sometimes works the way it's supposed to had looked back at her and said, "We see you too. You were never standing alone. You were never standing alone."